Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel, and I'm here again today with Kay. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. So today we're here to review Mario Bava's Black Sabbath. I almost said Blood and Black Lace. I get some of them mixed together, but yes. So it's perfect in time for Halloween,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's one of I don't know if I would say it's like my favorite. My favorite is probably actually Danger Diabolique, which I have the poster of right behind me. But Black Sabbath is up there. It's a really great film, I think. And yeah, had you ever seen it before? I don't think you had. Have you?
No, I've seen a handful of Bava films, but this is my first time watching Black Sabbath. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I didn't see it until I want to say recently, but it's starting to feel like time is flying, and it's I saw it in 2021, which kind of feels like a long time ago now.
Oh my
But
God, don't remind me.
yeah, and so I saw it then, and funnily enough, we can go into this a little bit. Like I saw it on Shutter then, I think, and it was the Italian version. And then when I suggested it to you, I sent it to do it for this review. I sent it to you on like a YouTube link, and it was it's available free on YouTube, like officially. And but the version they had up there is I didn't notice this until like literally until I watched it. I think it's the like the Roger Corman, like his like AIP, like American Empirical Pictures or International Pictures. They distributed like foreign films, but some of them were like redubbed or recut for American audiences. So this was that version, and I definitely think it's a lesser version. But so did you see? I guess you told me you saw multiple versions.
Yeah, so I watched the English version from the link you sent me, and I was seeing that everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people love this movie, and I was like, did I watch the right movie? Because they were talking about things that I didn't see. And so I looked it up and it was like, oh, yeah, a lot of stuff was cut or redubbed. I mean, obviously, it was redubbed for the thing, but they changed some of the dialogue and they cut some things out and just completely changed one of the stories. And so, yeah, so last night I watched the English version. And then today I was like, I should give this film a real chance. So I rewatched the Italian version. So I've technically watched the film twice over the last 24 hours,
Yeah,
but I feel like I only really watched it once.
that's awesome that you watched both. But what would you say are the yeah? What would you say were the biggest differences you noticed? Because I know, well, first of all, I haven't seen the Italian version in 2 years, so that's a little fuzzy to me. But I did notice that the stories are in a completely different order. So it starts with I think the one with the dead body and she steals the ring from it, and then the second one is the telephone, and then the third one is the Virgilac, and that's the American version. But in the Italian version, it starts with I think the telephone, and then the Virgilac, and then the one with the dead body. So that was like the main thing I noticed. And there's some cuts to some of the stories, like in terms of censorship. And then the main thing that really made me mad was my favorite part they cut out of the end, which is a Boris Karloff riding on the horse, and they pan back and it's him like riding the horse and showing them like running around with the tree branches and showing how they shot it, and that's not even in the American version at all.
Yeah, before we get too far into the film, we were talking a little bit yesterday about what a wonderful archivist you are, and I was hoping you could give a little bit of context for the film, like what year it came out, where it was in his career, and things like that. Because, like I said, like this is my first time watching it, and while I've seen some Bava, it would help to have like a broader contextualization of the film, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so it's 1963, and I think it's one of the first. Like, there's other versions or there's other examples, but like a very early example of an anthology film. The same year, I actually saw there was a movie called Twice Told Tales, which is like two different stories like cut together. I saw that at the Alamo Draft House. It's a Vincent Price movie, but it was the same year, so I don't know which one came first. But Black Sabbath was definitely an early example of an anthology film, which you can see in like Creepshow, which is another Halloween classic. And I mean, the coolest thing about Mario Bava is he's just highly influential. Like, I thought, well, one rewatching it this time was really interesting watching the Virgil Acts sequence because, I mean, I've always like because I've been watching a bunch of horror movies for Halloween, and there's such a close connection between like zombie movies and vampire movies, and in this one you can definitely see that because you see the vampires like you see the the people becoming vampires and the people thinking that their family members are still their family members in that sort of moral conflict, but that is in tons of zombie movies now. But yeah, I just think so it's earlier in his career, and he's a really influential filmmaker. Like Planet of the Vampires has been noted as like a huge influence on Alien, and Prometheus, and that's another film of his. Danger Diabolique was like a very early example of a comic book film. So he's really done it all. He does the cinematography for his movies. I don't know for all of them, but this one he was a co-cinematographer for, and other films of his, he's the main cinematographer. But yeah, he's a really interesting filmmaker, and even I mean, you can see giallo like bits in some of these stories, but he was definitely an early like example of a giallo film with some of his stuff, like Blood and Black Lace. And I think like people think of giallo, they think of Dario Argento, they think of Tenebrae and like Suspiria, Deep Red, but I think even Dario Argento was inspired by Mario Bava. So I think Mario Bava is a really interesting, like early practitioner of like genre exploitation films.
Am I right in remembering that his first film was like 1961 maybe, and it was The Man Who Knew Too Much, which was inspired by a Hitchcock film?
Well, I don't know if that was his very first movie, but yeah, it was. I think it was The Girl Who Knew Too Much, and it was like, and there was like multiple cuts of it, much like this.
The Man Who Knew Too Much is the Coen brothers, might be.
Yeah, and there was multiple cuts of that. It had another title called The Evil Eye. I mean, shout out to Film Junk, which we're both listeners of. They did a Mario Bava Premium, which they talked a lot about some of his movies. Like they talked about that Evil Eye or The Girl Who Knew Too Much. And they talked about this. They talked about Planet of the Vampires, Bay of Blood, which inspired like Friday the 13th. There's like, so he even invented the slasher in some ways, and before Halloween or any of that. And there's direct like kills in Bay of Blood. They're taken, or that Friday the 13th uses like directly. And Bay of Blood also takes place like in the woods with teenagers, so it's a similar kind of thing. But yeah, and so that premium is really good. It came out a couple years ago, but yeah, I know Jay. I mean, I've been listening to Film Junk for 16 years, which is gross. I hate saying that because I don't even understand how it's been 16 years. But yeah, I've been a fan for a long time, and I know Jay Cheel, who is one of the co-hosts, has always been a massive fan of Mario Bava, and he loves Danger Diabolique. And I remember watching one of his video reviews, like way back in like 2007 or something. He reviewed Danger Diabolique, and I know Mario Bava's style. I think has definitely influenced him, at least in some way. And yeah, just like the lighting in any of his movies are fantastic. I mean, you look at a Dario Argento movie, and those movies are filled with crazy lighting, but there's something specifically about about Mario Bava's lighting that I really like. And yeah, I'm just a big fan.
So I know that at some point in his career, Hitchcock was doing kind of like Hitchcock Presents. I don't know if that necessarily counts as anthology, and I do know that was later in his career. But considering that Bava was still pulling reference from Hitchcock or inspiration from Hitchcock early in his career, do you feel that he was pulling from that influence for this as well, or do you think he'd moved on to kind of his own voice and perspective as a filmmaker?
Well, I was actually thinking about that earlier today. I do think Hitchcock predates Mario Bava a little bit and is still,
Yes.
very influential. He's obviously known as one of the most influential directors ever. But I think that his Hitchcock Presents thing, I guess I would differentiate that a little bit because it's TV, but even if you look at it chronologically, I think.
I was just thinking in terms of like anthology-esque material, but I think that was later. I was just kind of wondering in general if you knew of any influence he was still pulling from Hitchcock at this time in his career, or if he had kind of moved on.
Well, I don't know. I haven't read anything specifically about like him saying for sure that he's influenced by Hitchcock, but and his stories, like I think he definitely there must be some influence from Hitchcock because, like you said, The Girl Who Knew Too Much, even a lot of his films, like you can see connections from him to Mario or to from Mario Bava to Brian De Palma. And Brian De Palma was also influenced by Hitchcock, so it's kind of a lineage, and I do think he must have had some influence by Hitchcock.
Yeah, there was definitely kind of a feedback loop between European and American cinema at the time. And I know that Argento did pull a lot from Bava, since Bava was kind of like, I think he was like the godfather of horror. I forget what exactly his like nickname or title was, but I think it was something like the godfather of horror, the grandfather of horror.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I know that he was kind of like the birthing point for Giallo, or Gialli as it is, and definitely Argento made it his own. But yeah, I mean, Bava deserves so much respect for being the GOAT, the OG in that field. And as you mentioned, like he definitely took a lot of the inspiration from Hitchcock and made it a little bit more risque in some ways, a lot more violent.
Mm-hmm.
As I just mentioned, kind of it pulled into Giallos, and you mentioned, it birthing the slasher genre. So he was really kind of pushing it. And it's interesting too, because like Gialli was really like, it was like grindhouse, it was underground and stuff. So it's kind of interesting how even that has like kind of transformed to be back in the mainstream, and it's all like cyclical.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was just wondering if you, because I know that you had seen this movie before and are a big fan of Hitchcock and all of this, if you had just personally seen any reference there. But it is very, very different. And it is an anthology, so it's different in that way too. But yeah, so I just wanted to get maybe a little bit more history or context of like how to interpret the film. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So just to set up like the movie or like the plot a
Yes,
little bit.
please. Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's introduced by Boris Karloff, who I love in the movie, and he
You're
sets it
talking
up.
about which version are you, or are you talking about both?
I think it's in both. It's he's setting up. Well, I haven't seen the Italian version in a couple of years, but at least in the American version, he definitely like cuts in between segments.
Right.
And then I'm pretty sure he's in the Italian version, but I might be wrong.
He is, but there aren't the segments in between. He's just at the beginning and end.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess in the American version, it's more like creep show or something.
Yeah.
Like he is like introducing each segment, but yeah, I really liked him. He is in the Virgil-like sequence, and I think he's amazing in that. But he has those introducing segments, and then well, it depends on which cut you're watching, but it starts with, at least in the Italian version, the telephone, and that's it's an interesting. It doesn't have like a lot of time to really do or to like, explore its premise, I think, but it's interesting as an early version of like somebody being terrorized on the telephone, which is like you see that in Scream, you see that in tons of horror movies.
Black
So,
Christmas is my personal favorite.
yeah, for sure. And so what did you think of that one? That
Yeah,
segment?
so this is one where I'm very glad I watched the Italian version. I'll talk about both of them kind of simultaneously because the story varies significantly depending on what version you watch. I'll start with the American version because that's the one I watched first. So in this one, as you mentioned, it's this young woman, and she is living in an apartment by herself, and it's very lavish. She clearly is very wealthy. And she's getting like constant phone calls, and the first couple are nobody's there, or there's like light breathing, I can't recall, but nobody really replies. And then the third one, they start to kind of terrorize her. So they're like, I can see what you're doing, I'm gonna kill you. And it becomes increasingly threatening, and she becomes increasingly paranoid. So like at one point the caller is like, I know you're in a bathrobe right now, and then she changes into a nightgown, and they're like, why did you change into your nightgown when I told you not to? So it becomes like very sinister very quickly. So in the English version, the story did not work for me at all. I actually really did not like the story, and I thought it was a pretty rough way to start the film. I was like, I guess they're just opening with the worst so that they can get it out of the way. I like just kind of was hoping that it would get better from there, and I think it does. But in this specific version, you can see where editing hands were very heavily involved. So a lot of it was censorship, because in the Italian version, there are lesbian overtones, and you can tell that in the English translation, they were like, no gay stuff, no gay stuff, which is
I have to ask, what were the biggest examples of them cutting that stuff out? Because I confuse like what is in each cut, but like because I still feel like I sense some overtones from what I watched, but I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding things.
Yeah, I'll definitely get into it. Also, I just want to apologize if there's background noise. I'm dog sitting and they're eating a bone very noisily. So just in case any of that carries through, it's not me. It's the
Oh yeah,
dog.
no problem.
But yeah, so the most significant difference is in the story itself. So in the original story, it is this girl who's being terrorized by what she believes is the ghost of an ex-lover who died or was imprisoned or something. There's so much variation in the English version. I'm sorry, in the English version, she's terrorized by a former lover who she says died 3 months ago. So there's no way he could be calling her, but somehow she's hearing his voice on the phone, and he's like, I'm going to kill you. This is the last night you're going to be alive. And so it becomes this kind of terror. And at one point she like gets a note underneath the door, and she looks at the note, and this is like the worst part of the short, where like you can see it's clearly edited, where like you could
It's like
see
writing it
this,
on.
yeah, so you can see
Yeah,
basically where like the original film is like frozen, like they did a still
yeah.
frame and then put like editing over top of it. So there's like a digital graphic where it's like a hand, like a ghostly handwriting. But it's the stupidest thing. And I was actually laughing when I first saw it, because it's like she's holding this paper, and it's like so in the image, like in the frame, she's holding a piece of newspaper, but in the edit, it's like this square piece of like letter paper, and it has this like calligraphy writing, and it's like it's so long too. It's like, Rosie, now you will
Yeah.
finally understand. There is no way out. This will be your final night. Yours, Frank. And I'm like, this is like, why? I was like, it's like comically long. Anyway,
Mhm.
so she's like, oh, it's the ghost of my ex-lover here to kill me because I ratted him out to the cops, and that's why he died. And so it's supposed to be this like guilt thing. But then the story gets even worse, where like she calls her ex-lover's ex-lover and is like, please come keep me company. And the woman is like, why? And she's like, you're the only person I trust, because she's like, why? Like, this woman doesn't like her. They clearly are like antagonistic toward each other. And she's like, please come. Our ex-lover is trying to kill me. And like, she had like stolen this man from this other woman. So they're, yeah. And so it just makes no sense. But this woman comes, and they set up like a red herring of like her trying to kill the lead protagonist. But then, oh, it's a fake out, and it's actually like the ghost, and the ghost takes the physical manifestation of this guy, and then he tries to kill her, but she kills him, and then
Yeah.
he like crumples to the ground. And it's just like not satisfying. It's a terrible story, and I'm like, I don't get it. And it just felt like really weird. And so there were like some gay overtones in the relationship between the two women, but you can tell that they very much cut that out. And then in the original Italian version, it's much better because there's no ghost. It's the other woman the entire time pretending to be this guy, and he's not dead. He was in prison. And the newspaper clipping she was holding is saying that he got released from prison, and so she's scared that he's going to come kill her. But even in that story, she still calls this woman and is like, please come keep me company, rather than calling the cops and being like, I'm getting threatening calls. The guy who escaped prison, he's going to come here to kill me. Maybe you guys should fucking come here and catch the guy. She's like, oh, let me call the ex-lover of the guy who's coming to kill me. And it just doesn't make any sense. But then she's like, even the woman is like, why are you calling me of all people? Okay, I'll come. And it's like, what the fuck? So she shows up, and like they kind of, it's like, oh, they never knew what was between us, and you're like, oh, this is the gay shit, this is why they cut it out. And I was like, more of this, please. And so yeah, it's eventually revealed that like she was the one making these phone calls, and like somehow putting a handkerchief over the phone made her voice sound like a man. I don't know, where she's like, oh, this is Frank, and it's like, what the fuck. Anyway, so like she tries to kill her, but then the guy actually shows up and like strangles her. And this is the other part of the film that I don't like, because like, okay, there's this whole scene. I'm getting carried away. I'm almost done. There's this whole scene where the guy is strangling the ex-lover who was called, and he's like strangling her with this piece of pantyhose. And there's this moment where her face is looking direct, their faces are like this close, right? She's being strangled. She looks at him and he looks at her, and their faces are like this. And then later, after she's dead, he looks down and was like, oh, you're not the one I meant to kill. How could I? And I'm like, fucking bro, you were looking right at her face. How did you not see? And I just felt like that was like such a cheat. Like how could you not just redo that scene better, or like change something to make that better? And then he like goes and tries to kill the main girl, but she has a knife under her pillow and stabs him. And so it's just like the story is so different, where it's like, one, it's like a ghost, I guess, and then the other one is like this kind of love triangle that makes a little bit more sense, but is still executed really poorly. I got really carried away, but those are the differences between the two stories, and I don't like this one. This is my least favorite of the three.
Yeah, like it's weird because I feel like when I watched it, like the new or the American version, I was confusing things because I have my memory of the old one, and then I was just like, I don't know if I was quite processing some of it, because I was like, because I was remembering like why, because I remembered him killing the other lover, and then like that didn't happen, and I was confused by it, and there's the ghost thing, which is obviously actually like the dumbest addition they had, but yeah, I mean, I don't mind the original version, but it's definitely like much worse in the American version for sure.
Much worse. You guys should have just let it be gay. Like they wouldn't have in America in the 60s, because they just wouldn't. But it's also just like, wow, you guys were really willing to sacrifice this story for censorship, which, I mean, tale as old as time, but I'm just saying. But yeah, that was my least favorite. But I will say, looping back around, beautiful set design, nice colors, like it wasn't always shot super beautifully, but like I got what he was going for. Like honestly, the whole anthology felt a little, maybe it was just the time, but it like just felt a little low budget, where it's like you guys couldn't get a better camera angle there. You know what I mean? It's just like you guys didn't have, okay. But yeah, so it's just like it looked nice, but I was so distracted by how frustrated I was with the story that I was like, whatever, there's purple light, I don't care. And like maybe I just needed to like let myself be in the vibe, but I couldn't get over them looking each other in the eye and him saying that he didn't recognize who she was. And the room was lit. The room was lit. It wasn't even a dark room. It wasn't
Yeah.
even a dark room. And I'm like, Mario Bava, you're this master filmmaker, and you didn't watch this in the dailies and say, let's do that again.
Mhm.
It must have been low budget.
Yeah, it's definitely low budget for sure. It's weird
I
because with
don't know
Mario
what it
Bava,
was.
I feel like he's like most of all like a technical filmmaker. He's like sort of a cinematographer at heart.
Not
And
in
then
this.
also, yeah, fair enough. But like also, I feel like he's sort of a, I don't know, like schlock master. Like he at the heart of his films, he sort of is concerned about like money making and like selling it to different territories. Just like I don't think he cared if his movie was cut up and like dubbed. And he was really just, even though I feel like he cared about the craft to some degree, I also feel like he cared about making movies in popular genres and also making money. So
He was turning them out. He made a bunch of movies.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm not here to drag a fave. Like I said, I've seen a bunch of his movies. Huge respect. I think Black Sunday is an incredible film. I like a lot of his films. Some I don't. I feel a little bit lukewarm on, but like overall, I have respect. When I say that he wasn't a good cinematographer in this one, that was a bit. I mean, there's, come on, there's a little bit of truth there, but I'm not trying to drag a fave. But
Well, I don't
yeah,
know
I
if the best cinematography is in this segment, but I think there's some pretty amazing cinematography in the Virgilac, which is our next segment.
yeah, yeah. I mean, did you have anything to say about this one? I just steamrolled right through all of my thoughts, but do you have anything to say about the telephone segment?
Well, no, mostly just I prefer the other version. Obviously, this one was like it was much shorter. I don't know how much, but it was a little bit shorter for sure. And obviously, they cut out major stuff and shift things around. And the original one's definitely better, but I still like the idea that it presents, and I like the telephone stuff. I like the apartment. I like the relationship between the two women, and I think the idea is good, but like you said, it's not like executed amazingly.
Were there any visuals that really stood out to you in this segment, since that was one of your favorite things about this anthology?
Well, not this one specifically, other than just sort of like the apartment, but that's not like it's just set design. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know if there's like any amazing cinematography happening in this segment specifically, but I would say the best cinematography is probably in the final segment. Well, I think the best cinematography is in the Virgilac, and
Mm.
then the final segment, or the one with the ring and the
Drama.
dead body. Yeah, that has good cinematography too. I don't think as good as the Virgilac, but that has good cinematography too. I think, or at least good lighting. And
Yeah.
then
Mhm.
yeah, then like the framing device, I think also does. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it for the concept and everything. It's unfortunate that it was butchered so extremely. But yeah, I appreciated it too. There were some fun colors and stuff. Great, great stuff. But yeah, cool. We can move on to
Yeah.
the next. I had a thought and then I lost it. Maybe I'll come back around.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to jump in at any point, but yeah, the next one is the Virgilac, and this one has Boris Karloff in it, and so he's the host, but he's also in
Oh,
this as
I
one of the
remembered what I was
characters'
gonna say. Can I
grandfather,
say
or
it?
not grandfather, father. Go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you because it was about the phone bit, and so I just didn't want to get too carried away. But I didn't also mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. But when you were talking about Boris again, it reminded me. In the American version, as you mentioned, it's almost like Creepshow, where there are like transitions or like segments in between to tie them together. And for the phone one, it has one of the, it's incredible to me. We're like, okay, so he's like standing in this like black room, right? The like staging room, and he's like in a green screen, right? And there's this huge red phone behind him, this like huge image of a phone, and he's like, in our next segment, and then it like cuts to like it fade cuts to him picking up the phone, and as he's picking up the phone, there's like a tiny version of him like looking up at the big version of him picking up the phone, and he's like, and it's just it, I love it. It's incredible. It was my favorite transition in the thing, and one of my favorite moments from the English version in general was just like that fucking bit, because that was so funny. That fade cut and him looking up at himself as like a tiny little version on, just I can't get enough of it. It's amazing. Anyway, that's the only other thing. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I'll let you introduce the next segment.
Well, no, stuff like that is awesome. I think it's what, I mean, aside from cinematography, I think it makes Mario Bava special, because he's just really creative with
He
a
has a
lot of
good
the
sense
stuff he
of humor.
does. Yeah, for sure. But yeah. So the next segment, it's about these people like living in a cottage, I guess like in Eastern Europe or something, and I think like 17, 1800, something like that. And so their father like leaves, but he says if I come back like within 5 days, then like or after 5 days, then I'm definitely a Virgilac, which is like a version of a vampire. And then he comes back exactly at midnight, and they don't remember exactly, how much time it's been. Um, and so they're trying to decide whether he's a Virgilac or not. But yeah, I really enjoyed this segment. I think the cinematography is great. It's the most creepy. There was stuff in the movie or in the segment that genuinely creeped me out. More so than any segment. I wouldn't say any segment. Well, maybe even Drop of Water, the dead body creeps me out a bit, but I would say this one was the creepiest for sure. What would you think? What did you think about it?
Well, what creeped you out the most?
Lots of stuff. I mean, Boris Karloff, even to the way he just like nonchalantly is like, "Go kill that dog," the one that's like barking, and and it's very very 1700s. They don't care. Um,
I care. I care.
and that the way he's like very like he like wants to like be with his grandson. He's very creepy around his grandson, and then he ends up riding off on a horse with him and like kidnapping him. And then later the grandson like appears back, and then just a shot of they know that he's a Virgilac, but the son like banging at the door as he's crouched down, like there's something about that shot specifically. I don't even know how to explain it, but the way the atmosphere of like the fog and like the way he's crouched down, the sound, and then his mom like going crazy being like he's out there, he's cold, and like wanting to let him in. I thought that scene was amazing. And the scene when Boris Karloff is riding away with him, and there's just this weird like lighting on his face. I thought was all great and disturbing and creepy.
Yeah, for real. It was my second favorite segment. I think the water drop one was my first, but this one was really good. Definitely the heaviest in like atmosphere. Also one of the only, I think it's the only one that actually takes place outdoors a little bit, because the phone call one is all in her apartment. Um, and then the water drop one is, I think, between two apartments, but it's all
Yeah,
also indoors. So he really took advantage of the outdoor landscape. The outdoor landscape. He really took advantage of part of the story taking place outdoors to really amplify that element of the atmosphere. So as you mentioned, there's like a lot of fog, a lot of this really like super colorful lighting that we've seen a lot. And it's like, it's not natural lighting that's been enhanced. It's like very like, it's very like what's the word, it's like storybook-esque, where it's like very unreal, where like sometimes their faces are bathed all in purple or like all in red or all in blue. And I was trying to figure out if there was any like color theory tied to this, but I don't think there is. I think it's truly just the vibe, because I'm like color theory about purple on a villain's face. I don't know. So
yeah,
he's either going for like something very vague, which I don't really think is the case for these stories, because they're like not that deep, like there's substance there. Anyway, so he's using a lot of these like very vivid colors to keep this like great kind of like intrigue in terms of the visual elements. So you get that a little bit in the phone call one, not as much. That one's shot a little bit more standardly as far as I can remember. And then this one, he's really like taken room to play. And the stories are the same in the English and Italian version, but the English version is still like a little bit weird. And it's so funny because it's like the changes that were made to the phone call one were because of censorship. And then in this one of the changes that they made it like exponentially creepier. Where like you kind of mentioned like the grandfather in the English version. Okay, in the Italian version, it's very normal. He's going to take, so he's become a vampire, and everybody has this kind of like sixth sense that like maybe he didn't come back in time, maybe he's not really, maybe he is a vampire
But
now.
the funny thing is, I think it should be pretty obvious. Like, he's like acting crazy.
Right. Everybody's very on edge, like very visibly on edge, but nobody's said anything. So it's all, everybody's just kind of like, you fucking seeing this guy? Anyway, so he's like, so in the Italian version, he goes to his daughter, the mother of his grandson, and she's holding her son, and they're terrified. And he's like, why won't you let me hold my grandson and, be close to him? And she like kind of, regretfully like hands him over and everything, and he's like being creepy with his grandson, where he's like, aren't you cute? Ugh. But in the English version, they're like they're like, what would be the creepiest possible thing for this grandfather to say? What would be a super fucking normal thing? Is for him to go say, oh, why won't you let me fondle my grandson? What the fuck? What the fuck? Who was like, oh yes, him asking to hold his grandson, that won't translate. He has to say that he wants to fondle his grandson. That will connect with American audiences. What the fuck? Who made that choice, dude? That like, when I saw that, I like took a moment. I was like, is this real life? Is this real? It was real life. What the fuck? What the fuck?
Yeah, I noticed that too, and it was definitely creepy. But the only thing I could think is like, I mean, this is just like me trying to think of how it could possibly happen. But I thought maybe that word was different at the time, or wasn't as loaded, and maybe it just meant to hold. But
No, and that's totally true. Like it used to be that way where it was just like, holding whatever, but like it wasn't when they did the translation. And so it's like, why the fuck would you choose this word now when the original dialogue was perfectly fine? Like,
yeah, for sure. It's definitely
anyway.
weird.
I had to get that out of my system. But yeah, that was insane. But yeah, overall, I thought the story was good. So yeah, the father returns and he has, the vampire curse, and it like kind of creeps through the family where like he, everybody eventually kind of gets infected, bitten, whatever, and he gets away with the grandson, and then there's that whole chase. Overall, I thought it was pretty good. There were some parts that I didn't think worked as there were some parts that I don't think worked as well. Like the romance part was like a little bit weird, where like the gal is like a bartender, and he's like, oh, what's your name? And she says his name, and then she says her name and then walks away. And then like a couple scenes later, he's like, I love you, I've always loved you, I'm gonna marry you. And it's like, what? So there are like parts of like that in the story where it's just like, okay, like I guess like everybody was just fucking popping rings on each other left and right, I guess is what we're supposed to assume. So there were like those parts of the story where I was just like, if you really need that romance element, and it does kind of come back around, because then later like she is like trying to seduce him so that she can bite him, so it kind of sets up where it's like, oh yeah, he would totally let her bite him because he wants to hit that so fucking bad. And you're like, okay, I guess. But it's like in the grand scheme of the story, you're like, he just met her like yesterday, and now he's like, I'll die for you, my love. And you're like, okay, like, all right. But yeah, so I don't know. I think it was like my second favorite overall. It wasn't a bad story, but I was also just like, could have workshopped it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I just really like the atmosphere of it, and I feel like
Yeah.
it comes at a point where it crosses the like, mythos of vampires and the mythos of what I think became zombies really well.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. That's interesting.
Because the way they all like have their loved ones become vampires, and then
Mm,
they can't like see that they're vampires now. They can't like differentiate the fact that they're not the same anymore.
mm.
But that's something that's used like in tons of zombie movies, almost like all of them.
Yeah.
And
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say it's I mean, with almost every Mario Bava movie, I feel like he's ahead of his time, but that's one example in this, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I like the way that they kind of set up that little bit too at the beginning, where it's like, the one truth about vampires is that they must drink blood and they crave the blood of those they love the most. And you're like, okay, cool. So yeah, and there were some cool outdoor shots like near the end. They're like in this kind of like half ruins area, and she's like, where's my son, where are you? And then she like looks around, and like all of her family members are like, oh, they're all like changed or turned or whatever. And then there's like kind of confusing part where at one point, I'm terrible with names. I'm not gonna try. The blonde girl is like brought down to a cellar, and there's like skeletons and cobwebs and everything, and they're like, "You'll be safe down here." And you're like, "Where even are they? Like, is this the basement of their house? They just have this like weird like catacomb dungeon?" I'm like, okay, it seemed like a pretty fucking normal house from the outside, but you're telling me they have a crypt downstairs with a skeleton? All right, like
Yeah.
okay. Um, so yeah, I don't know. There were like those parts where like in terms of the aesthetic, you're like, this is really cool, oh spider webs. But then like when you think about the story, you're like, where are they? Why did they what? And he's like brushing away the spider webs, and he's like, here, lay here amongst the skeletons, you'll be safe. And then he like passes out. They're like in this like high pressure. Maybe he was lulled to sleep by the vampires, but like he falls asleep, and then he wakes up and he's like, "Oh, where'd she go?" And it's like, "You, this is the worst time to fall asleep." um.
Mhm.
Anyway, I don't know. I'm just here to roast Black Sabbath, and I'm having a really great time. I'm not. That was a bit. I feel like I'm roasting it, and I don't mean to. These are just things that like don't make sense to me, and so detracted a little bit from my enjoyment. I feel like I feel like if this was something where like maybe we hadn't been if I hadn't been gearing up for this review, and I was just like, all right, let's tune in for some vibes, and I'd like had a couple beers or something, I maybe would have liked it a lot more. But here I was just like, what is the story? What is the story? And so kind of I think I got a little bit too in my head. Oh, but really quickly too, since I'm already just like chatting so much. I wanted to pull up this meme because it perfectly describes my feel. I don't know if you can see. Oh my
I
god.
can see the face, but I can't read the if there's any dialogue.
There's dialogue. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's two faces. One is a normal face, and one is a gaunt, hollowed face. And it's like when a person dies in movie, when a dog dies in movies, and that's how I feel because he's like, "Go kill my dog," and they're like, "It's your most beloved dog, Papa," and he's like, "I don't care," and then they like you like hear the dog yip, and it's like, ah. Ah.
Yeah, the
Anyway,
only benefits or not benefit, that's not the right word, but
the
the,
benefit of killing the dog.
not the benefits, not the right word, sorry. But the only thing with that, because I it's hard for me when a dog is killed in a movie too, but the only like thing was at least it was off screen and you're not actually seeing a dog. It's just sound effects.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I'm like hamming the bit a bit here, the bit a bit. But yeah, no, it's fine. Like I've seen I Am Legend. I've seen way more brutal
I
dog
couldn't I
deaths.
couldn't even handle I Am Legend because well one I have a German Shepherd and
Oh,
they really dragged that out and they really
they
like
did.
they like milk the emotion of it as much as they can.
My emotions were milked. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, this one, they just suggested milking the emotions, and I was like, oh, my emotions. um no, but yeah, this one was fun. It was a cool vampire story. It was creepy, and I like what you mentioned at the beginning about like the scarier parts, because like that shot of the kid at the front door was really scary for me too, and the way they framed it was so great because it's all cast in this blue light, and he's like using this kind of like tonal lighting again, so it's at night and it's outdoors, so he's kind of using the like midnight lighting in that sense, but it's also just like so blue that it's like it takes on a kind of unrealistic vibe. And maybe that's part of the benefit of using these super saturated colors in these movies or in these shorts, is that you kind of get like, it feels I feel like I've been talking about fantasy a lot lately, but it does take on this like kind of like grim fairy tale,
For sure.
fantasy,
Yeah.
otherworldly, supernatural element. And I think that that blue in that scene really helps with that. And then, yeah, the way they frame it, where it's like it's like kind of shot from the ground. So the little boy's like in the middle of the frame and he's kneeling with both palms against the door. And he's like,
Yeah.
Mama,
That
I'm
shot is the one I found
cold.
really disturbing. Yeah.
So creepy. And then the mom is like, let me at my child, let me get him. To
And
the
then she
point,
stabs the husband
I
for
know.
trying to stop him.
He's like, it's not real. My love, it's not real. And she's like, fuck you. Pops him right in the fucking gut with a knife, and then goes and gets got by her vampire child. And it's just like, there are moments like that too, where I'm like, come on, like let's be real here, where it's just like the women in all three shorts are like so hysterical sometimes that it's a little bit silly, where it's just like in the phone one too, she keeps getting these insane calls, but instead of just like taking her phone off the hook or like unplugging her phone, she keeps answering and she's like, oh hello, oh prego, and it's just like,
This,
stop answering the phone.
yeah. Well,
Anyway.
that's one, like I feel like there's obviously the like, the way the times were, but then also I feel like they're not like going for any sort of like, drama or realism or anything. It's purely like almost just like cartoony.
Yeah, no, and I'm like, it's not something where I'm like docking points for that. It's just something that I noticed. And I think in like that scene with the mom, it's like so overblown where like she has seen her child is dead. She knows her child was like kidnapped and killed and blah blah blah. And like she's so hysterical that she kills her husband to get to what she thinks is the voice of her dead child. Where it's just like, girl, I'm not buying it. I mean, I've been crazy over less, where it's like the last chocolate croissant in the bakery counter and like I need to
Yeah.
get that. Like I go crazy. So I understand. But at the same time, it's like, did you need to stab him? Like she stabbed like up his ribs too. Like it was a fatal blow. It wasn't just like a nick in the arm, like get out of my way. She's like, I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah.
And I mean, they all die anyway. And it's not
Mhm.
about that. I'm just
Yeah. No, it's definitely like very amped up. And in terms of the lighting you brought up, like I feel like none of the lighting, like the lighting that I love, is not realistic in any sense. I feel like he does it purely for like an expressionistic like feeling, and I feel like your comparison to like Grimm's fairy tales was a really good one. And I also, what was I gonna say? I love like the blue on Boris Karloff's face and all of that stuff. And I mean, maybe this is like a pretentious comparison, but it reminds me of like something like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or something, where you have these sets that are not, they're just completely abstract, and it's supposed to represent a city, but it's not meant for any sort of realism. It's just supposed to evoke a feeling, and that's what I love about his lighting the most.
Yeah, he makes sure to keep it very outside of reality. And I like that, especially for this kind of like horror anthology where it's like, you pop it on while you're sorting candy after trick or treating. And like,
Yeah, for
it
sure.
definitely gives like that feeling of Halloween and like those kind of like spooky, and I think I like it stylistically a lot. My issues are like really with the stories. Like if
Mhm.
this was all just like no dialogue vibe pieces, I'd be like, let's go. Because there are these stories and like it just didn't click in my
Yeah.
brain. I don't know why I needed to illustrate that, but because it didn't click, I just kind of struggle with it a little bit. But yeah, I think that's really all I really had for the second one. There were a couple of shots in it that were just a little bit funny to me too. Like there was one where near the end, the blonde gal is like making out with this, and she she goes and like is biting his neck, and then it cuts to like the family, and they're all in the window just like
I love that
watching,
part. Yeah.
and and like even the little son is there, and he's like he's just like, what the fuck? And in the context of the story, it makes sense because they're all like the vampires, and they're like, have you turned him yet? But then it's like in terms of like it's such a comedic cut to me for some reason, where it's like this very like intense, and it's not even that intense, like they don't build it up too much, but it's like this intense moment of like, oh, he's like, oh, you know, and then the family's just like in the window. You're like, okay, cool. But yeah, so that was funny to me. And then there was one earlier, but I forgot what it was. Oh yeah, it was just in the bar. I thought it was really funny where he was like, what's your name? And she says his name, or she says her name, and he's like, that's a beautiful name, and she just walks away. I thought that was really funny. But yeah, I don't think that those were intended to be funny. It just tickled me. But yeah, that's all I had for the second one.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one's my favorite out of all of them. Definitely number one for me, at
What
least.
makes it your favorite one? Just the vibe, or?
The vibe. I mean, I think the story, at least for me, works the most out of all of them.
Mm.
Um, you know, yeah. I mean, it would probably maybe I haven't. I'd have to rewatch the Italian one. But I would say my ranking of them would be this one, and then the telephone, and then the drop of water.
Really?
Yeah.
We have the complete opposite scale, where I have the drop of water, I think, as my fave, and the phone one as my least. But
Yeah.
let's get to that one. I think it was the short is actually called like the drip of water, or the drop of water, or something like that. I think it's drop of water because it has
Mhm.
that clink, clink sound effect that they use for horror. But yeah, if you want to introduce the short and tell me what you thought.
Yeah, so this is the final one. Well, I mean, it was different in the cut I watched in terms of the ordering, but at least in the Italian version, it's the final one, and I think it works best as the final one. But um, so I feel like when I watched it this time in the American version, it felt like really rushed and like very short, and I don't know like if there was like a lot of stuff cut from it, but I kind of wish I would have watched both back to back. I mean, I've seen them both, but the other one was like years ago. So,
Mm.
um, but yeah, I mean, I feel like the effects, like I feel like the body is really great in this, and there's really good moments and also creepy moments. Like I would say the telephone. I don't know really why. Maybe I would put this above the telephone. There's some of the telephone. Like I feel like it was kind of the conceit of it was interesting, but there's not anything I find disturbing or like maybe slightly disturbing, but like I don't find anything overly creepy. And that it's just the other two segments where I find stuff creepy. You know, when she is attacked by the body at the end, I find that creepy. And yeah, so I would say I like this segment, but to me, the Virgilek is the standout. And yeah, but I still like it. What did you think of it?
Of the drop one.
Yeah, sorry, the drop of water.
Yeah. So I think they're pretty much the same between the Italian and English version. In fact, I think this is the only one that's actually exactly the same, because like the vampire one had that little bit of change in dialogue that was just like, oh, what's wrong with you? But it was otherwise the same. And then the phone one was really changed because no gay. Please gay. Um, but yeah, this is the only one that as far as I can recall, had no changes between the two. So you can kind of just talk about it both ways. But yeah, this one, it's like she's like I don't really know what her profession is. Some kind of healthcare provider. Like, I don't know if it's like hospice or some kind of like end of life care, but she has been treating this elderly woman and giving her like medications and stuff, and they introduced the story with this woman passing away, and it's not like an unexpected thing, except that it happens in the middle of the night. And so this woman is called, and they're like, you have to come dress the body and kind of prepare her for the funeral because you were the one who was taking care of her. And it's like a dark and stormy night. And he definitely takes advantage of that. So like at the beginning of the short, she's on the phone and there's like thunder and lightning through the window, and she's like, "Do I have to come now? Do I have to come now?" And they're like, "Yes, you must." Well, you don't hear the other side, but then she's like, "Fine, fine, just give me time to get there," and like hangs up the phone. And I feel for her because she was like sitting down and starting to quilt. She'd put on her gramophone, she'd poured herself a drink, and I'm like, a woman after my own heart. I feel you. If I got called into work in the middle of a rainy night when I had just sat down and got comfy, pissed. But she goes, and she goes, and yeah, so she's they're like changing her clothes into like the gown she's going to be buried in, and yada yada. And the main character notices a hefty gem on the bony finger of this older deceased woman, and is like, "Don't mind if I do." So she steals this gem, which looks like a pretty hefty sapphire, and is like, "Thank you." I mean, there's like a little bit of a kerfuffle where she like drops it and some water spills on her, and I don't know if that's like the ghost, because it's like some water drips on her, and so you're like, "Oh, maybe it's the water possession." Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so in the process of stealing the ring, she becomes cursed because it's revealed that the woman died from ghosts. She loved doing seances. It was her hobby. Every Friday, rain or shine, seance. Seance at Linda's, or whatever the fuck her name was. And I guess she like summoned too many ghosts and it killed her. And after her death, the ghosts, I guess, were still lingering around and didn't like that the nurse stole the ring. So they're like, "We're going to haunt you now." So then she, makes her leave, goes back home, and starts experiencing like creepy phenomena. So like there's the sound of water dripping, but her faucet isn't dripping, and she like checks it and it's dry. And then there was like I can't remember if it was a phone ring. There was like some other noise or disturbance or something that was like nothing. I can't remember what it was. But there were like weird like banging and noises and stuff happening around her house. And she's like, "Oh, fuck, I think I'm haunted." Turns out she is. Uh, and, and yeah, and so then things kind of escalate, and the figure of the woman who she just dressed to be buried appears, and she has this petrified, terrified face. Like she died with a face of terror, and it's like her face is frozen, like, and it's like, it's kind of funny. They have this like whole mask, and one of the bits is like when she's dressing the body originally, she like closes the eyes, so like, and then before she leaves, they pop their eyes back open, and she's like, "Oh shit, this woman isn't actually dead. There's some bad stuff going on." So anyway, that older woman, the deceased woman, is like following her around her house, and it's a lot of like, "Hand over the doorway," and like, "Oh, you turn around and her hand is right creeping up your neck." And so it has like some cool like ghoulish bits for that. And I thought it was just the most it was the story that made the most sense, just because it was like a ghost story. They weren't really trying to explain anything. It's like she stole the ring, drew the wrath of the ghosts, and then the story ends with her dying in the same way from like fear, and then somebody steals her ring. And so like the idea is like that the ring is carrying these ghosts, whoever steals it. Yeah, I thought it was like the most kind of like enclosed in itself, where like it made sense. It was fine. It was a little bit creepy. I thought the ghost face was interesting. I was actually wondering if you knew anything about like the ghost face, because it seemed like some cool special effects for the time. But yeah, I don't know. I think it was cool. I think it was fun. It worked. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the ghost face, I mean, I think sometimes it was a prosthetic mask and sometimes it was a dummy, but I think it worked really well, and it's probably my favorite aspect of this segment.
Did like he design it, or was somebody else doing special effects for this? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was Mario Bava specifically. I mean, it would probably be some other like designer or like special effects person. But yeah, I thought it was really good. And it reminded me of like Drag Me to Hell a little bit, which is one of my favorite horror movies. just in the way the curse is passed around, like, and there's this aspect of a moral, like, punishment, which is also present in Drag Me to Hell. So I really like all that stuff. And the more I think about it, I think this segment is definitely better than the telephone. So I'm gonna have to readjust and say that the
Don't let me.
Virgilac. Well, no, just the more I think about it, the Virgilac, Drop of Water, and then the telephone. But the Virgilac is definitely number one for me. But yeah, I like this segment. Part of me does want to rewatch, at least in the Italian version. I need to get like a Blu-ray or something of this. But yeah, I really like this segment, even though I feel like it's probably the shortest out of all of them. But yeah, the Virgilac is definitely the longest. There's like a significant chunk of time spent on that. But yeah, but I like this one for sure.
Yeah, it was also super vibey, super atmospheric. Sorry, he just came up to make gross noises right next to me, I guess. He finished with his treat. Um, Palmer, everybody. But yeah, I liked it. I think that aside, yeah, it was my favorite story and my second favorite in terms of visuals and atmosphere, because again, it was like all indoors, so what he was able to do was a little bit limited, but I still like the way that he set up her apartment. And there were some cool shots where like you would see the whole like room of her apartment and a little bit of the hallway, and it really kind of gave this like eerie, abandoned, like dark feel. And again, there was like this whole thunder and lightning storm going on, so there was like that. um, Lots of bold colors again, lots of kind of unreal colors. um, but yeah, I think it was cool. It was decently acted. Again, set design, super rich set design in this one. um, I wonder who was doing like the set dressings and stuff, because the interior design for her apartment and the apartment at the beginning were just like, so they felt really lived in. Like there were like little knickknacks everywhere, and the walls were like completely filled. Like it made me wonder if it was like a recycled set from something else, or if it was like just completely done, because it seemed just like very intricate. But maybe that was like his own choice for this, or I don't know. I just had a kind of a lot of questions about the production. For some of these, and like the mask, I was kind of curious about like if that was something that like he had an original inspiration for, or if he drew from somebody else, or if he kind of collaborated with somebody on it. I guess I'll have to look that up. I probably should have looked that up before. I don't know why I was hoping that you would just be the encyclopedia on this. It's not fair. I should have done a little bit of research. But yeah, so I thought that it had some cool elements. It had some cool scares. Lots of proto horror stuff with like the drips and hauntings and all of that. But yeah, I mean, the mask was also like a little bit goofy. Let's be honest. I mean, like I was kind of hamming it a minute ago, but it's just like, I mean, it's scary, and I'm like, especially for the time, like it's. I'm not trying to discount it, but at the same time, it's very like, and so it's just like, and that like
Yeah.
I feel like that's even like doctor. It's more like, and you're like, I'm so glad that face was caught in camera. Anyway, I'm gonna regret this being filmed. No, it's fine. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it was good. I liked it.
Mhm.
I contributed nothing just now with all of that, but I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's definitely a goofy movie overall, but I feel like I like the goofiness of it. I mean, maybe with some of these movies, like exploitation movies and genre movies, I feel like I give a lot of things a pass for the time, and I feel like the sort of thing that they're going for.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I definitely, well, I feel like not all the stories are perfect. I have a lot of fun with all of them, which is why it's still a favorite of mine.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I know I'm being like critical, and I mean, I think it's fair to critique it,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
be a little bit critical, but at the same time, like, I definitely understand why this is so beloved by you and so many other people, because like it really does capture a lot of the Halloween mood and feeling and atmosphere, and it's just like nice breezy little shorts to pop on. And like among anthology films is definitely one of the better ones. Like I was kind of thinking like Three Extremes isn't bad. Of course, Creepshow's good. Like, there are a few, but there aren't really any good horror anthologies. And so, like, within that, like, subsect of films, I would definitely say that this is, like, a really good one. But, okay, walk all over me. But in terms of just, like, the stories individually as standalone were weak for me. And then, like, the thing as a whole was a little bit weak for me. But, yeah, I guess it just kind of depends on, like, how you're judging it. So I thought it was fine. I had fun with it. I didn't hate it or anything. I just, there were things I would have changed.
No, yeah, that's definitely fair. I mean, I don't know. I think it's this. Well, I think I like Creepshow as probably my favorite anthology. This after that. Um, Although, if you count, and I was thinking about this, if Grindhouse could be counted as an anthology, and that's a little unusual, but it's two movies, and then there's each like a bunch of trailers in between and before. So if you count all of that as different stories, it's kind of an anthology. If that is counted, that would probably be my favorite anthology movie. But I'm trying to think of other anthologies that I've seen that aren't like horror. I can't think of any, but I know like every time I look at a director's filmography, there's always like at least one anthology where they like teamed up with a bunch of other directors, like Paris Tim, which I saw like 15 years ago. I don't remember anything about, but that had like the Coen brothers and like a bunch of other people. Um, so yeah, the anthology is an interesting genre, but I feel like usually they're not executed that great. But there's a few great ones, like I said, like Grindhouse, if you count that, Creepshow, and this for sure.
Yeah, I would recommend Three Extremes if you haven't seen it. There's one really famous director in it, and I'm completely spacing on his name. But yeah, it's like three, I think, Korean horror shorts, and they're pretty good. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it, so I don't want to hype it up too much, but it's one I would recommend. I remember it being like reasonably solid, and I think most people would agree as far as I remember. But that's the only one that's really jumping to mind, and I think it's it coming to mind prominently because it's also three, and so my brain is like threes. Relax. I stopped petting this dog for like 1 minute, and he's like, oh, it's like relax, dude, come on. Anyway, yeah, I liked it, and it definitely inspired me to watch more Bava. I really want to rewatch Black Sunday now. I was looking on Letterboxd, and I've seen like the top handful, maybe like 8 to 10 most popular films. So I have a lot left to watch, but I would say that I have like a decent grasp of him, and like I said, I have a lot of respect for him. Granddaddy horror. Uh, yeah, I think he's great.
Have you
And
seen Demons?
yeah,
That's Lamberto Bava, who is his son, and
yeah.
I think I saw Shock a couple years ago, and that's Mario Bava's final film. But he co-directed it with Lamberto Bava. Well, I don't know if officially, but Lamberto Bava definitely worked on it.
Mm.
And I think he trained Lamberto Bava, and he like worked with his dad on a bunch of movies, and then eventually went on to make his own movies, but made Demons 1 and 2 and other movies as well. But I really like Demons, and yeah, it's cool how that was passed on.
Yeah. Yeah, Demons is fun because it takes place in a movie theater too. So it's a good one for all the cinephiles.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, it's been a little while since I've seen that one, but I liked it too. And I keep almost giving myself horse ears. Haha, horse ears. I like keep shifting that way. But yeah, I think that's about all I had to say about this one. I would watch it again. It's definitely one that I could see myself rewatching next Halloween just for the vibes. But I think if I were introducing somebody to Bava, this would be like the second wave of recommendations, where it's like get the real bangers in there. And then if somebody's still curious, I'd be like, you know what you might like. But yeah, I think that like he's having some fun with this one. You mentioned before too that like one of the other differences between the two is in the Italian version it ends with that really cool scene where like it's like the shot and then it zooms out and you see like the whole
Yeah.
film set with like the boom mics and people running around, and it's like it kind of ends on this really fun note, and so that kind of helps like tie the tone of the film together overall. Like it's not like trying to be so serious, and I appreciate that.
I
But
think it's
yeah.
almost like a comic book, which you like Creep Show is doing the same thing. Like they specifically show like EC Comics and all that, which it's based on. But like all the stories in this and the introductions and the colors, like I could literally see them being on a comic book page.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, I think that all that stuff goes with the tone of the movie, and I really like that stuff.
And I don't know what this was rating or how the rating at the time would translate to ratings now, but it feels like accessible for maybe not all ages, but definitely like 11, 12 years plus. And so I feel like there's that part of it too, where it's like, I mean, Creep Show's maybe a little bit more like tweenage and plus, whereas this one feels like, you know, mature kids could probably handle it and be fine. So like, there's kind of that element too, where I don't think he's trying to like strike fear into the hearts of his viewers, you know.
I would say
Um,
the Verge Like's the scariest. I mean, there are some severed heads and whatnot in that one.
oh right. I mean, I haven't thought about ratings in so long, let alone
Yeah,
speaking to a child in so long, that my context is so skewed. I'm just saying, like, it feels like he was trying to make something like for a wide audience. And
sure,
I
yeah.
think it was successful in that. It's fun. I'd watch it again. I thought it was okay. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, maybe this will sound silly, but if I rated it, which I do because I have a letterbox, I would give it a 5 out of 5. That's just me, but I would give it a 5 out of 5.
Nice. I'm glad you dug it. Um, I I changed my rating twice. So I originally came in the English version as like soft 3, and then I was almost gonna give it a 2.5, and I was like, he doesn't deserve that. He doesn't deserve that. And I was like, 3. I'll give it a 3. And then I was like, and then I found out about the Italian version, and I watched that, and I was like, oh my god, this is so much better. I'm gonna give it a 3.5. And then I saw another movie and I was like, this is a 4. And I was like, if this is a 4, there's no way that's a 3.5, which is maybe unfair, but I'm gonna come in back at like just a flat 3. I think it's very fine. I think it does what it wanted to do. I think it's fun. I'd watch it again, but like, was it one that I was thoroughly enjoying? Maybe like at parts. Um, yeah, I don't know. It might go up if I just kind of come in from like a vibe centric standpoint in the future, but yeah,
Mhm.
I'll give it just a solid 3.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, yeah, it's a movie I really like. I mean, I can see issues with it, but overall, I really like the tone of it and like the vibe and a lot of the stories, even if they're flawed, I think are fun. But like, and you were talking about the final scene with them showing the set and the effects and how they show like a running horse. And I was watching the documentary about the making of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola movie,
Uh-huh.
and they kept showing that clip as like a source of inspiration, um, because a
Cool.
lot of that in Dracula, in Bram Stoker's Dracula, they use very like sort of obvious film effects and just like matte paintings and things that are very unreal, but it's kind of going after that same tradition of just evoking like sort of I don't know like a painterly or just like unreal tone. And yeah, I think I really like that. I like that vibe, and also I just respect how influential Mario Bava was. I think he's one of the more influential directors out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, especially an Italian film, like he's a pillar. Um, and yeah, I will plan on watching more. I am definitely going to be making time to rewatch Black Sunday before All Hallows Eve because I really love that one and I think it's his best. I don't know if everybody would agree, but I personally think it's his best. Um,
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I'm glad you chose this one. I think it was really fun. I'm glad you reached out to do another review. And when I was like, your pick, buddy, you chose this. And I think it was a great choice. Super fun for the season. He is just chewing this on my leg, and I'm being covered. Yay. Probably a good time to wrap up unless there's anything else you would like to share.
Yeah, that's about it for me.
Okay.
And yeah, so happy Halloween to you and to everyone out there. It's not Halloween yet, but it is soon. And yeah, thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for abiding my special impromptu guest, Palmer, as well. I hope he wasn't too much of a distraction, but at least you can get a little. Oh well, no, he's gonna. Okay, well I gotta go.
Yeah, thank you again, and we'll see you next time, guys. Bye.
Okay.